name's Suk Gill. Thank you for joining this session on the Leadership Development Programme. I want to start by giving you an intro to myself, and then I'll talk through some of the key topic areas around leadership and communication skills. So, as I mentioned earlier, I'm a sales, communication skills and a leadership trainer. Been working with Acudemy for a number of years now, and in today's session, my main focus is primarily leadership. So I want to kick off by talking a little bit about the big challenges with leadership in 2022. As you can imagine, as a trainer, I've been running training sessions around this area globally over the last 5 to 7 years or so now. And I want to start by this area around challenges for leaders, for managers, whether you're managing 2 people, whether you're managing 22 people, whether you're managing virtually or whether you're managing people face to face. There are huge challenges, and we have faced huge challenges over the last 2 or 3 years. But the first question I want to put out to the panel here is all around leadership, and to understand a little bit more. If there was one thing that you think has been a huge challenge in 2022 for managers and leaders, what would that be? So if anyone wants to shout out now, we'll get your thoughts, and then we'll have a conversation around some of these topic areas.
Communication for me. Sorry, Eunice, I'm jumping in.
No. Boss goes first. Boss goes first.
Communication for me.
Okay. Explain in a bit more detail, Yusuf. What do you mean by communication?
I guess, since COVID, everyone's working on a remote basis, hybrid basis. So having effective communication with people who are semi-remote or in the office and collaborating on a global scale. What's the effective way of communicating through the channels? And then probably leading on to that, you look at difficult conversations if I'm doing it remote or if I'm doing it face to face. There's a slight difference between the two. Even though we're like 2 years on from COVID, I still think that this is still a challenge for leaders of 2022 and 2023.
Fair point. I've taken down 2 things from that, right? So one is communication skills as a whole, right? So in today's conversation, we'll have a chat around how to be a more effective communicator. So I've got some ideas and tips to share with you guys today around that area as well, which I think could be quite useful. Thanks, Yusuf. 2 really good points. Thank you.
Right.
Eunice, I think you want to go there.
Yeah. Well, again, with COVID, I was thinking more dealing with some people. I guess after COVID, just forgot how to behave, in a professional manner. So that's what one thing I've struggled with throughout like my career in COVID is or even after COVID, people just being, I guess, what's it called? That just acting in rambunctious ways. Not knowing how to, like you used to say, communicate, not knowing how to act, not knowing how to treat the managers or whatnot. It's like everyone that you deal with feel like they're what's it called? They're what's that word? There's a word for it. They're sorry?
Entitled.
Entitled, exactly. Yes. Yeah. Perfect. Entitled.
Yeah.
Yes.
That's
what I.
Yeah. Okay. Really good point. Right. So what I've taken from that is behaviors. How do we create the right behaviors with our team? A massive challenge. So I'll talk through one really simple, easy tip on creating the right behaviors, and it's using a coaching methodology to get there. Okay. So I'll talk about that later as well, Eunice. Thank you very much. Anyone else want to share anything here that stands out?
I think that they probably said the best 2 things that come in my mind for the last year. So we currently every day, for example, we are exchanged with leads, for example. So we see that there's a process of changing mindset, people changing mindsets. They don't have enough time to talk to you. There's a rush in terms of, for For example, based on what I'm actually usually do, we try to expose our product. We try to go effectively in a way that we give more information in a small lapse of time. But people nowadays don't really have this time to really to listen to you. And two things in terms of communicating directly on the call, but also in terms of email sending. I think that there is a very big challenge in terms of a script, in terms of how we go for the email, how we the type of email we send to this lead, to this market segment of our client we are looking for, because it's all about the time, it's all about rush, it's all about people don't have time today to listen to all your script. We have to find out what is all those key points, keywords that we can just develop, and not in a glass, but in a small lapse of time, effective way, we can just deliver what we want to say to them. And the power of attraction also, I think it is very important. How we attract people toward us and to listen to us. That's what I've been able to measure for this whole year of 2022.
So guys, the first point I want to come on to is communication. We've all spoken about it. I want to just share a couple of really important tips that I have found useful when communicating, because as you can imagine, as a trainer, 2 years ago when COVID hit, my business transformed in the way that I was working with clients, all of a sudden running face-to-face training sessions to now do it virtually. And some of the big tips that I want to share with you guys in terms of being effective with whether it's you're speaking to clients, whether you're leading a team to try and build relationships, build better connections, and when it comes to communicating virtually, some of the big tips I want to share, and I'm just going to get a quick shout out first of all, guys. So in face-to-face communication, your body language and your tone and the content or the words that you use all have an impact on your audience. Okay, in face-to-face communication, body language, your tone, and the words that you use all have an impact on your audience. So, anyone got any thoughts or views on what you think that percentage split between those three is? Face-to-face communication.
1/3 each.
Okay, 33.3% recurring. There's always one use for that.
There is, yeah. If not, definitely your body language would be slightly higher.
Okay.
Yeah.
Any other thoughts here?
I would say, so your question basically is what's more important, or
the impact on your audience?
The impact on your audience. So yeah, okay. I would say the first thing would be your body language.
Okay.
For sure, because you want to show that you're confident.
Mm-hmm.
You don't want to show you're not sure of what you're presenting virtually.
Mm-hmm.
And second would be the content, of course, because if you don't have any content that is not intriguing to someone, their mind is just gonna just go somewhere else.
Okay.
And then of course the way, and you said the last point was language.
Yeah.
Or no, tone. Sorry, tone.
Yeah.
Yeah. Then I would say tone. Tone would be it's still impactful, but not as impactful as the audience, or not as the body language or words.
Okay.
I would say tone. Again, I feel like body language and tone can be about the same, actually, if anything.
Okay.
Because the way you speak, you're going to be using your hands too, right? Huh?
Changing your mind.
Yeah, I know, indecisive.
No, not because it's making me now realize, like, because when I see you talk, so it's like your tone, but at the same time you're using your body.
Yeah, body language and tone, I would say same top.
Okay. So this is Moravian's theory, right? So we'll have a chat. So when you're in face-to-face communication, body language, it counts for 55%. 38% is your tone, and 7% are the words that you use. Okay, 7% are the words that you use. So let's have a think about this. And the big challenge I get back, some of you guys might be shocked about, is why are words so low? And yes, you've got to know your stuff, of course you do. But when your body language and your tone impacts the message that comes across, face-to-face interactions. Let me give you an example of this, okay? Let me use my body language and tone. Let's just imagine Umar has told me a really funny joke, because I know he's a very, very funny guy, right? And I go to Umar and I say, Umar, that's the best joke I've ever heard in my life. You get that a lot, right, when you tell a joke. But can anyone here, do you believe what I've just said there, Umar, in terms of and the way that I've said that to you? So the message, it's all about the message the other person receives is very different to actually what I'm trying to get across, okay? So body language has an impact on your tone. So let's think about this. You guys, face-to-face interactions, body language plays a huge part, okay? A huge, huge part. I'm gonna go into the science in a second. So when we think about virtual communication, does body language play a part? All over the phone, does it play a part?
Not as much.
No.
Not as
No.
much?
No. It's all about your tone. Right?
But then
That's
if
what it's all about.
we got our cameras on.
Oh, then it's body language. Yeah.
Yeah, definitely can. Yeah.
So let's test this for a second, okay? So it's all about engagement. I'm trying to build engagement with you guys. In a virtual setting, only 21% are fully engaged in a session like this. 21%. A lady called Amy Cuddy. Introduced this idea of power posing. And what she says is that when we're communicating, face-to-face, virtual, whatever it is, depending on how we are feeling and our emotions in that, before we go into a conversation with someone, it has an impact on our body language. We know that story, guys, right? You got to do a massive presentation and you've kind of got your arms crossed, or you're looking downwards, you're scratching your neck. Shows that you're nervous, you're a little bit worried about the interaction that you're going into. Okay? What she says is, can we reverse it? Can we hold our bodies in a certain way, which makes us feel less anxious, more confident in our communication style? And she's backed up with science and the fact that going into a positive pose, so chest up, chin up, before an interaction that you go into, releases something called testosterone, which is a growth hormone, which makes you feel more confident, more open to discussion. You feel more, you're able more to deal with challenge and people's views and opinions when you're presenting or talking. Going into a negative pose, head down, looking down, a negative pose releases something called cortisol, which is a stress hormone. Whenever you get sweaty palms and you're a little bit worried or anxious about communicating in a situation, that's the challenge around it, because you're going into a negative pose beforehand. My body language impacted my tone. So my view, one of the biggest challenges when it comes to communicating and leading a team virtually is that we need engagement, because only 21% of people are fully engaged in a session. So my question to you guys, yes, body language plays a part, but also certain things we need to do to build engagement with people. It goes back to something that Umar was talking about earlier, is that actually people don't have time. People haven't got the mindset to want to spend time with us and listen into a conversation, in a meeting, in an interaction that you're having. And that is a massive challenge, right? This is 2 big tips I've got, okay? The first one is, before you go into interaction, any meeting conversation that you have, there's a couple of things we need to do beforehand, right? The first one is you kind of need to have a plan. You need to have clarity around every conversational meeting that you're going into. Ask yourself 3 questions. The first one, what is it I want to achieve in this conversation? What is it I actually want to achieve in this conversational interaction? The second thing I want you to think about and ask yourself is, what's my conditions for success? What's the bare minimum that I need to get from this conversation or meeting? The third one, and this is where we can make a massive difference. I really like the third one. And it is simply saying, what do I want the other person to be saying after an interaction with me? And write it down and have absolute clarity on those 3 questions. Okay, that helps you have a plan, an objective, to be able to think, actually, it's all about shifting perspective. Okay, it's all about shifting perspective. The biggest mistake we make as communicators, we communicate in the way that we like to communicate, rather than communicating the way the other person likes to receive communication. And I'm going to go into that later on around personality styles and the way different people like to receive communication. There is a massive difference, right? Because in any interaction we go into, we want to communicate what's natural and normal for us, but actually shift perspective. Think about the other person. What do you want them to be saying after an interaction with you? One more thing I want to say around any conversational meeting you go into with your teams, and that is to build engagement. to build engagement, the biggest tip I can share with you guys, and this is giving away all my secrets, this is exactly what I do in every single meeting or training session that I have. I not only share my agenda, but I get every single other person to share what their agenda is. What do you want to get from this conversation today? What's good use of your time? Umar, people that you speak to don't have time. Ask them, what's good use of your time in this interaction, this conversation today? Whether it's with your teams, clients, whoever it is, asking that question makes it really powerful. Why should they? And it sounds really harsh, but if it's a client or someone else that you're trying to interact with, what's going to make them want to stay engaged if there's something in it for them? Every interaction has to be something in it for them, right? If there's no value, you're right, Yusuf, there's no value for them, and we haven't found out what that value is, what's the point of us talking? What do you want to get from this conversation? When I have a 5-minute meeting, hopefully Yusuf will back me up on this. When it's a 5-minute, 20-minute meeting, I'll say, what do you want to get from this conversation? What are we here for? Because there has to be clarity, and we're both working towards some kind of shared agenda. It makes it easier for us to work collaboratively rather than more combatively, okay? And there's a difference. The other area we spoke about was difficult conversations and behaviors, okay? So with behaviors, that's a massive challenge, okay? And something that I share with leaders throughout at the start, especially at the start of a year. At the start of a year, I always get leaders to think, actually, you know, how do we create the right behaviors with our team? How do we create the right values and everything that we're doing for our team so they know what they're working towards? And what I do and what I help them focus on here to help with this is, rather than us telling them, this is the behaviors we're looking for, this is what's going to make us all successful as a team, but we ask them, what does good look like? If you guys are my team and I sat with you today, so I'd say, right, okay, for us to be brilliant in 2023, talk me through all the behaviors. Talk me what good looks like for us in our role, for you guys to be effective. So me as a leader, that's one of the first questions I would ask. Once I've taken that down, taken note of everything, we then starting to form and create behaviors that you have come up with yourself. This is a coaching methodology. Remember, coaching is about getting the other person to the conclusions you want them to get to, rather than telling them. People don't like to be told. People do not like to be told. You go and dictate to them, this is what I need, this is how I want it to work. It's not going to be effective. So when it comes to behaviors and getting people to work and think and act like you, the biggest challenge is that what a leader wants, if I sat leaders down in one room and I sat their team members down in another room, okay, and I asked them both the same question, what does good look like for you guys to be successful this year? It doesn't always match up. What a leader wants and what a team member wants, it doesn't always match up. So, Umar, going back to your point around someone asked about behaviors, going back to your point, it's crucial. It's crucial to create the right behaviors. So going back to that scenario, once I've asked what good looks like, I then ask the question, what do you want from me as a manager to be able to help you get there? What support do you need from me to help you get there? And what we then created is a contract. Without really realizing it. Okay, you told us this is what good looks like. This is what I'll agree to. And obviously you can't take any silly requests on, like, I don't know, 100% pay rise. But you can't do this kind of requests on, but actually realistically, what do you want from me as a leader to be effective this year? And the other thing to do, you know, that's the first thing. So creating right behaviors, get them to come up with it, but then ask them how you can be effective as a leader. What do they need from you at the same time as well?
Well, from your experience, how have you talked about culture and behaviors, or is it kind of combined into one? And what's your thoughts on that? Just getting your thoughts.
Yeah, it's a really powerful buzzword area. Everyone's talking about driving culture, and people say it's not just about bean bags, it's not just about having all these fun things in an office. Yeah. Yes, I think it plays a part. I do think it plays a part, but I don't think this is a be all and end all. You know, I think there's a bigger picture around culture that, you know, when we think about our teams, step into their shoes for a second, and when we talk about people being motivated and driven to genuinely want to work hard and be effective, our role as leaders, one area that I think is really, really important is to understand intrinsic drivers. understand, and I talk about motivation quite a lot, and I talk about extrinsic drivers versus intrinsic drivers. So that's an area for us as leaders to enable, if we think about our why, our purpose as leaders is to create teams that are not just motivated up and down, but consistently motivated and driven to achieve. That's become harder during COVID. It's become a lot harder. I speak to a lot of companies that went remote and are in a couple of days a week. They're finding culture a massive challenge. People not met. All of this stuff is happening. There's one or two businesses that I work with that have just enforced everyone in every day. So that's their approach. There's positives and negatives. The one big positive I've seen with that, unbelievable culture. It's just people being in there the whole time. After COVID, they just went 100%. It's like, this is how we want to work. And you see a lot of empty offices now, and everyone kind of working. Someone that starts new with the business, if you step into their shoes for a second, a new starter, and they come into the business, they will have loads of questions still. When they join, they'll have loads of questions. One of the biggest things that I focus on a lot of my leadership programs is that they need to understand, we need to help them understand what their journey looks like. And what I mean by that is that their career journey, their personal development journey, not just what they need to hit, the outcomes that they need to get to. We shouldn't just focus on the end results, but helping them to understand and recognize really on in their careers and their roles, whenever they're joining, is that they need to see that vision of not just career. It's not just career, right? Because some people, you reach a ceiling, and some people are quite high up and they reach a ceiling. It's actually, where do I go from here? Then they grow outwards. They develop outwards, right? And that's so important as a leadership team, or a team of leaders need to be able to understand what a vision of the journey of someone looks like. People will leave because of money. I get it. Money's a motivator. People will leave because of money. But the stats say from a while ago, actually 75% leave because of the managers and not the role itself. They leave because of the managers, the relationship with the managers, the connection with the business, seeing the bigger picture. And one of the big areas that I focus on is managers being able to help their team members visualize what their journey looks like. If you just focus on careers and nothing else, yes, they're likely to leave. But if you focus on development, their journey of actually why do you want to learn this? Why do you want to improve in this area? If we can understand that, if we can understand their intrinsic drivers to the job and the role that they do, we have a much better chance of people staying and sticking with a company or a manager, right? Because they see that growth journey. And I always think I do a lot of work with graduates. Like I've done the last couple of years, I've worked a lot with graduates, and whenever I've done work with their managers, I've always said that even with grads, they might not know where they want to get to. They might not be able to see that vision, but asking the right questions rather than telling them, this is what you need to do, this is how you need to do it. Asking the right questions through coaching them makes a difference, I think. Okay, one other topic area that you guys have spoken about here is difficult conversations, being able to deal with a difficult conflicting situation and conversation. Probably headline tips, and one of the ones that I always talk about, and it kind of links into feedback, and it links up to the body language you spoke about earlier as well. So one of the things that we do is that when we're giving feedback to someone, we need to make sure that obviously it's effective. And the one big tip that I share, if you're going to give feedback to someone, be soft on the person, harsh on the situation. So soft on the person, harsh on the situation or the behavior. For example, let's say I was gonna give some feedback to Shameen around performance. I would do it like this. So Shameen, I want a conversation with you about performance, but where I want to get to by the end of this conversation, if us agree to how we can be more effective in the way that we're working. How does that sound from your perspective? Get agreement for you to be honest and upfront with your feedback, and say, Shameen, from my perspective, performance hasn't been where it needs to be, and this is the impact it's had. Okay, but I want to get your thoughts on this, Shameen, to see how we can kind of focus and work on in this area. Notice my body language. Notice how I've shifted the issue and being more direct with the issue and the problem rather than being an attack on Shameen, right? So there is a difference. In a difficult conversation, one of the first things to do is keep the situation away from the problem. So soft on the person, harsh on the situation. You can be more direct, you can be more upfront, and honest with your feedback. If you said that actually I want to be honest at the start, but then creating that shared goal and saying, right, want to get your thoughts on this, Shameem, what I've just said there. It makes sure it's more collaborative rather than competitive. The other big tip is that when we are in a difficult conversation, this links into communication as well. In difficult conversations, it's all about managing emotions. So managing emotions. So I want to give you an example of this, guys. One of the when I was in sales a number of years ago, I had an old manager that had a one-to-one with myself. And in this one-to-one, I was frustrated. I was annoyed. And a number of things, most things that salespeople are annoyed at, the targets, the clients, the money I was earning, etc., etc. I ranted for 5 minutes in this one-to-one conversation. And at the end of those 5 minutes, my manager turned around to me and he said, okay. And I said, you're not going to say anything? He said, no, sir, I'm just thinking about what you said. And I've got a question about what you mentioned over here and a question about what you mentioned over here as well. Do you want to just tell me a little bit more about that so I can get a better understanding? That was his response. What he did, between stimulus, someone speaking, and you responding, you have a moment. What he also did is, in a really, really clever way, he shifted the conversation from emotion to logic in one sentence. From emotion to logic in one sentence. So my response all of a sudden now is going to be more logical because he questioned specific areas about what I had said. And when it's about being able to recognize our emotions at any given time and be mindful of the other person's emotions as well and adapt accordingly. Okay, and I think it's a really important tip around stimulus and response. If someone's speaking to you responding in a difficult conversation, you have a moment to think before you respond. Listen to understand, don't listen to respond. So listen to understand what the other person is saying rather than listening to respond. The majority of the time, the biggest mistake we make around communication skills is that we listen to respond. We hear something and we're ready to ask another question around it, rather than listening to genuinely understand by asking more questions. It is easier for us to be able to deal with conflict when we have this much information as opposed to this much information.
Sorry, one last thing. What would you say for 2023 that leaders should look out for, other than the 3 brief topics that we discussed?
Yeah. It's funny, I'm doing a webinar in a couple of weeks on this as well, and it's all successful mindset. So my big tip is for leaders is to enable growth mindset. Enabling growth mindset. So there's a number of questions you can ask yourself, ask your team members to constantly focus on enabling them to be comfortable to fail. Okay, I know it sounds really strange, but growth mindset versus fixed mindset. Someone with a fixed mindset fears failure. So if you're constantly fearing failure, you don't want us to be seen to be making mistakes or getting things wrong. In your mind, you think, do you know what, either I'm good at this or I'm not good at this. And their behaviors, everything they do after that point onwards is their behaviors are exactly that. So fixed mindset. Oh, do you know what, I can't do this. I'm not very good at this. They don't want to be seen to be failing. People with a growth mindset will constantly, comfortably happy to make mistakes, because learning doesn't come from a talk or a training session like this, but it comes from actually taking some of this learning and trying it out. When you try out something new that's outside of your comfort zone, you're going to make mistakes, right? Some will fear making those mistakes. They won't try and implement. That means they're not learning. Whereas someone with a growth mindset, they are comfortable to make mistakes in order to learn, right? And that's probably one of the biggest things as leaders, being able to enable a growth mindset is through the questioning, is through the feedback that you give, is how much you coach your team members. Everything is, if we can enable growth mindset within our teams, it requires us to have growth mindset as well, and to put our hands up when we have made mistakes, because it's the only way people learn and improve and get better, right? So coming out of our comfort zone, enabling that as leaders is going to be a huge area, I think, for 2023, as people, start to deal with some of the challenges that are coming. Things like change. People are talking a lot about change within their business. There's a recession people are talking about. All of these things can have an impact on your mindset. And the one tip I will share with leaders is to be mindful of with their team members. Is the biggest thing that impacts our mindset is something we have full control over. And that is this line here. Be careful what you say to yourself, because you are always listening. Be careful what you say to yourself, because you are always listening. We fall into mind traps. We say things to ourselves after a call, after a meeting, after a tough day. And a lot of the time when we self-talk, we all do it. We all self-talk, right? We all say things. We might not verbalize out loud. There are things we're saying on the back of everything that we're doing. Things like, oh, do you know what? Always getting that wrong, always making that mistake. Do you know, if I don't manage to get this sorted, that's going to happen, this is going to happen, I'm going to lose my job, everything's going to go wrong. So we start to catastrophize. There's different mind traps people fall into that you just need to be really, really mindful of. So be careful what you say to yourself. You are always listening. Any other questions, thoughts, or comments here, guys? All good? Well, guys, thank you so much for your time. Hopefully there's been some good tips and ideas in this leadership program here. If there's anything further you need, feel free to get in contact with us. More than happy to help. Like I said, we run a lot of these sessions virtually and face-to-face as well. So, and a lot of our work is not just generic in terms of leadership development programs, but very much more bespoke on the needs for you guys as a business in terms of where you're at now and where you're looking to get to. That's part of our process to understand that and then build out a program that's relevant and useful to what you guys do. Thank you so much for listening. It's been an absolute pleasure. And look forward to speaking to you soon.